Hello and welcome back to my channel, my friends, and hope you're doing okay. And I'm just back with another little video. I thought we would have a look at making these today. Don't forget, I'm just a stay-at-home mum who likes to make pretty things with my hands, as it's a good way of relaxing, isn't it? And it aids my mental health no end. So I just sort of sit and faff around with wire, as we like to do on this channel, sometimes with beads, sometimes just with wire, and sometimes with other materials. And I thought I would show you what I've made this week, which are these absolutely gorgeous, I suppose you could call them boho style hoop earrings with like a beautiful embellishment around the sides. Aren't they pretty? So I thought I would show you how I made these this week, and let's have a look at list of materials, and I'll see you in a couple of seconds. So my lovelies, let's have a look at what we need to make these gorgeous earrings. You don't need an awful lot of materials actually, so that's a good thing, isn't it? So you're going to need some 1.25mm. I'm using bare copper because I like it. You can use whatever you like. So 1.25 is 16 gauge, so you're going to need some of that. You're also going to need some 22 gauge 0.6 wire. That's for the little decorative edging. And what else are you going to need? A little bit of 0.8 20 gauge, and that's just to make the little ear wire here. 0.8 is a good size that fits through most people's ears. What else are you going to need? You're going to need your cutters. You're going to need your 6-step bell making pliers, or indeed round nose pliers with your little markings on to make the loops nice and consistent. And you're going to need a chain nose plier or two, just whatever is your favourite. And aside from that, if you want to hammer very lightly the little loops, you're just going to need a simple bench block. And I would suggest you get a nylon hammer to hammer and work harden the frame. And if you're wanting a little bit of texture, then just bring out your little chasing hammer just to texture around the little loops. And apart from that, that's all you're going to need at this point. If I can think of anything else along the way, I'll let you know. So I'll just clear the table away and we'll get going. So whilst these are really relatively easy to make, I actually think they're extremely, what's the word, decorative, very sort of, if you like the sort of word boho, bohemian, they're very elegant in the ear as well. And I think they're just super pretty. All right, so let's have a look at how to make them. Now I'm going to show you how to make the frame first. Now I suggest you make 2 frames, obviously, if you're going to make a pair of earrings. If you're going to work this into a pendant, actually, that might be quite nice, which I'm planning to do, and to dangle some bits off the bottom. But you know, maybe that's a different tutorial, perhaps. Make both at the same time, I suggest. So come in with your 1.25mm wire, which is, like I said, about what is that? 16 gauge. So I'm going to suggest that you take approximately per earring, probably about 4 inches per earring, because you need a little bit of room for manoeuvre. So make them both at the same time. I always like to have a little bit too much wire than not enough. I think that's, you know, better to have a little extra than have to start all over again. So make them both at the same time. Okay, let's put those away. Excuse me. So to make these, I'm just going to use a glue stick as a mandrel. You can use whatever you like. I have so many different bits and pieces that I use as mandrels. Doesn't matter. So I'm going to bend my wire around the mandrel and cross it over like so. Okay. So you have a bit of crossover. So do both at the same time. So around your mandrel. Obviously it depends on how big you want to make these. Let me just measure this width for you. That's 3 centimetres which is just over 1.25 inches across. Okay, so just, you know, you decide. And don't forget, when you're bending your wire around, you do get a bit of spring back. All right, so what I do is just make sure you flush cut your ends first, Sammy. Always a good idea to flush cut those ends first. Right, so just chop the very smallest piece off there, Sammy. There you go. There we have it. So we just have these essentially. Then you come in with your pliers or your round nose pliers, whatever you like. So I'm just going to use the first mandrel on my plier, and basically all you do is pull this apart a little bit, pop your wire in like so, and then just make a loop like so, and then do the same on the other side. Just make a loop like so. So just do that on both sides like that. I suggest you do these at the same time because you can make sure that they're completely equal, you know, relatively equal. So you've got earrings that are the same size and the same shape, essentially. Okay, so you've got this. It looks like a mini torque bangle, doesn't it? All right, so come back in with your plier like so, and just bend. Actually, it might be better with, yeah, probably is with the round nose, and just bend that to make a loop like so. Just do the same on the other side. Doesn't matter how you do this, lots of ways of doing this. I probably do it, you know, in a old sort of mess about way, but it doesn't matter. And then you just give that, you know, a flatten like so. So you've got this. Do that with the other one, which I don't need to show you how to do. And then when you've got your hoops like this, come in with your plier. I'm just using a flat nose here. Just bend those upwards like so. So you have a little frame like so. All right, so do those at the same time so that they are exactly the same shape and size. Dead easy. Then what you want to do is come in with your nylon hammer and your block. I won't do this on camera because, you know, you don't need to see it. And just to give it some stability, just give it a hammer with your nylon, just so it doesn't flatten it. It still retains its circular form. Just gives it a really good work harden. All right, so that it's nice and secure. That's it. So that's your frame made. All right, so let's get on to this beautiful decorative circular section here. So this is where you need to come in with your, where are you, 22 gauge wire. Now there's a lot of loops to be made on my particular size. I think there's 20 loops on this, so you're going to need a decent amount of wire. So 30 for 20 loops, 12, I'm going to say about 20 inches perhaps. I might think about telling you different at the end, but I'm going to cut about 18 inches. And let's see how we get on. If it's less, I will let you know at, you know, sort of further on in the video. Probably will be less than that, but you know, here we go. So come in with your plier. And just basically, you want to be making some loops. So leave a little section, maybe about 1 inch at the end, and just wind around the second step on my plier here, which is 3 millimeters. So essentially, we're just going to be making all these little loops. So I know that there's 20 on my other earring. So I'm going to make 20 loops, like so. So hold your plier about a millimetre or two away from the loop next to it, like so, about there. Bend your wire around. Okay, and just keep going around and around until you have 20 loops. Now this is, you know, the size I'm making, 20 loops. When you make your own, I mean, you can use a smaller mandrel, you can use a larger one, you know, you just keep going like this, and I'll show you how it works when we get to the end. So I'll come back when I've made 20 of these little loops. All right, so I'll see you in a few. And welcome back. So I've made my 20 loops, and as predicted, I did have a little bit of wire left, but that's fine. I think, you know, you'd get away with 16 inches to make this size, the size for this one here. So, you know, just cut your excess wire off. And again, you can use that for other things, so don't worry too much. Right, so this is what we have. So if you've made your loops, they sort of do bend around on each other anyway. They sort of, you know, bend into a little sort of semicircle. So just come in with your frame, and you just want to double check that you've got enough, you know, enough hoops, enough little loops. So just pop your form down, and as you can see, when everything's on, it's perfect. Okay, so we're just going to cut just about here, and then just about here. Leave a couple of millimeters on either side of the last loops, like so. Now, I did say, didn't I, that if I forget to tell you any materials, I will let you know along the way. And as typical for me, I'd forgotten to tell you, you're going to need some 0.4 26 gauge, and you're going to need a good chunk of this because we're doing some wire wrapping. I'm going to say 30 inches because there's nothing worse than starting a design and then realising that you've not got enough wire. So whilst it's unwieldy, you know, when you first start to wrap, it is unwieldy and there's no getting away from that. It's actually better to have, you know, your full length of wire if you can. So what I'm going to do is start it here, and you know, obviously if you're left-handed, start the other side and just wind it round a couple of times like so, and then pop it towards the end of your form. So you've got this going on. Don't worry about this little end bit, get rid of that later. So come in with your little coil, your spring, not your spring, you know, sort of loops or whatever, and you're going to start. Now what I've done is I've done 3 wraps in each loop and then 2 wraps in between each loop, and I found when I was making these that's, you know, a nice ratio. So pop your 0.4 wire through the loop. Now whilst this wire is long, I suggest you do this really slowly, okay, and gently, because you don't want your wire to kink up. All right, so you've got 3 wraps here, and then we want 3 wraps inside the first little loop. So again, this is going to be slightly uncouth, unwieldy. It's going to give you some grief to start with, but you know, that's fine. Everything worth doing is worth doing and taking time over, isn't it? And the whole point of jewellery making, I think, for me anyway, it's all about the process and the relaxation that you get from it, isn't it? So here we have the second loop, wrap in the loop. Can you see that? So we've got 2 going on there. Let's just put another one in. All the time making sure that you keep this thinner wire, this thin gauge wire, nice and straight, nice and slow. Don't let it kink up. If it kinks up, you've every chance of it snapping, and that's just annoying. Okay, so through. So we have 3 wraps here. Pull it nice and taut. Okay, So in between the loops, you want to do 2 wraps. That's 1 and then 2, like so. So as you're going along, squish things down with your fingers. They make really, really good tools to your fingers. Okay, so we've got 3 wraps in the loop, and then 2 wraps in between the loops. So we just want to start again. So again, pull the wire nice and tight and sort of taut. Keep everything nice and straight. And as you're pulling through, use your finger to guide it. So you keep a loop here around the finger, just to make sure everything's nice and happy. And then back through, like so, and round the back. And then if you have to adjust things a little bit with your fingernail, that's absolutely fine, or indeed use your pliers, whichever. Okay, up, back up through. And then I use my finger as a guide to keep everything from getting kinked up. And then pull around the back. And then we now have 2 wraps in between. Let's go in for the 3rd. That's essentially all you do as you're going around. Really, really simple, but so beautiful, so effective. There we are. Okay, so there's our 2nd loop. Just squish things together with your fingers, like so. And then we want 2 wraps in between. So that's 1 and 2. All right, so just have a quick look at that. So we've got 3 in each of the loops and 2 in between the loops. So I'll just do one more and then we'll come back when we've done it. Oops. It's so unwieldy, isn't it, wire? Springy wire. Okay, so keep everything nice and open and untwisted. So that's number 1. And as I say, the more you go round and the shorter this long wire gets, the easier it is. Up through. Keep that nice and unkinked. And tug, like so. And then through for the last one. There we go. So 3 in each loop. All right, so you don't need to watch me doing all of this all the way around, do you? Unless you really wanted to, and that's a different video, I suppose. Should we branch into ASMR jewellery making? And then 2 in between. Okay, so keep going and I will meet you back when I have completed this and then we'll go from there. All right, so I will see you in a few minutes. So how did we get along? Let's just do this very last section here. So we're on the last loop. So 2 wraps in between the loops, and as you can see, it gets a little easier the shorter the wire gets, doesn't it? So 3 wraps in this final loop. That's 1 and 2, and then the last one inside the loop. So, you know, it depends on how large you want to make these. So it's just a matter of you experimenting and, oh, it's crossed over that one, typical. Experimenting and deciding, you know, how many little loops you want to make, how many is enough, you know, and the size of the frame, that kind of thing. Well, I've just crossed that one over at the end. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Try not to if you can. And then just do 2 or 3 wraps right at the end, which will just encapsulate that tiny, tiny little bit of wire that you cut initially. Okay, so there we have it. Let's just get my pliers. I'm just going to snip that little end, not the wrapping wire, but just that little end there, just a little, and then just wrap my 0.4 around and burnish it, you know, just sort of squeeze and push and squeeze and push, which makes everything nice and neat. Cut that off. So, you know, if you've left yourself 30 inches of 0.4, 26 gauge, you're only going to have a little bit left, aren't you? So I always find it's easier to wrap with a little bit more than I need. Right, so there we have our little earring. How cute is that? Beautiful. So everything should be nice and secure now, and it should be pretty happy. Now I like a little bit of texture. Don't know if you can see the light catching that. So all I do is just come in with my little block and my little chasing hammer, and I just gently tap just the very outside of these little loops, just very gently. Now you're only giving it a really slight tap. Okay, now mainly it's for texture purposes and sort of, you know, the aesthetics of it, but it also just very gently work hardens the little loops and makes them a little bit more sturdy. Okay, so we've got our little cute, if you want to call them Bohemian style earrings here. So the only thing left to do now is to make the little hooks to go through the ear, which basically is like that. Yeah, so it just pull it out, pop it through your ear and pop it through the hole. That's dead easy to do. So bring in some 0.8 wire, about 7 centimeters, which is about 3 inches. So let's say for each wire, let's say 1.5 inches. So just flush cut the end and then measure 1.5 inches. That's all you need, about 3 centimeters, and make them both together if you wanted to. So just come in with my plier on one side and make a little loop like so, like a P shape like we usually make. Okay, and then I usually come in with my 5th step, and with the loop facing upwards, bend it around the 5th step of your plier like so. So you have that kind of shape, and then all you need to do is just give it a little bit of a hammer just to make sure that it's secure, and attach it to one side of, oops, chain nose Sammy, there you go, just attach it to one side like so, and then just have a look and see how much wire you do actually need. So I'm just going to chop just a tiny fraction off there, just a fraction, and then pop about, I don't know, 5 or 6 millimeters down. Just pop a little angle into it, a little bit more of an angle probably, just to make sure that it hooks on like so. There we are, and that's how you make these beautiful hoop earrings. Aren't they gorgeous? Let me just show you how beautiful they are. Bohemian, if you like, hoop earrings. Aren't they pretty? Now, if you really want, you can dangle things off the bottom. I'm going to be doing something very similar in a pendant soon, so watch this space. If you wanted to, a little teardrop bead here if you wanted, but you know, they're beautiful as they are, aren't they? Just gorgeous. All right, so have fun making those. Let me know how you get on in the comments, and I will see you in my next video. Have fun, guys. Bye.